Welcome back.
Hi. All right, let's see if this is going to work. Okay, good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. Traci Wilson Kleekamp, President of Race Matters Friends. I'm here to talk tonight about internal and external organizational justice. I looked at the CPOA's morale survey that was last year, and the expensive one that you got recently that the city manager did of employees. And I thought they were both interesting in that the officers are asking for the same things that people in the mayor's task force on community violence are asking for, which is we would like respect, we want to be treated humanely, we would like to give input, we want to be safe in our jobs, and most of all, we want our supervisors to value the work that we do. And I don't think that's asking too much, but the surveys show that there is a problem. So it takes me back to Race Matters Friends thinking about philosophy and policy, practice, and historical context, and these things are all inherently together. So if you inherit something, do you inherit responsibility for its history, even if you have no awareness of that history? So one of the things that sticks out to me is that we also talk about equity, and sometimes I think people get equity and equality mixed up. So tonight we heard in the pre-council meeting that Krista Jones is paid less than the newest lieutenant. So this idea that we pay everyone the same and they're seen the same, they're not the same. People have different experience levels and things like that, and so they have to be treated differently based on who they are. So I think that equality can be unfair if you don't look at the principles involved. Same with our council districts. We should not treat them all the same because they don't all have the same need. They have different needs because of their history and the way we've treated them in history. So we have to be aware of that. So the philosophy part is the practice of how we treat people. My friends come from Japan, they bring gifts first, right? That's the way, that's their culture, that's how they do things. And the police department, the question is, what is our practice of how we treat people, right? So in the Missouri Quality Report feedback, it says that our city leaders don't systematically model and reinforce and recognize the values throughout their workforce with their boards and commissions and supervisors and partners. They mentioned the police department, that their core values and don't align with their practices. And we think that sometimes the secret of success is failure. So this is an opportunity to do better. What does organizational justice look like? First of all, it's distributive fairness. If you're looking at organizational justice theory, it's also an opportunity to have interactional justice. Employees look at how their managers and their supervisors behave for modeling behavior. So, and that includes coming to work on time, how you talk to people if you show up to meetings, and how you engage with the public. That's important. And the other one is outcome-based, like how is pay done? Is it done in a way that everyone's aware of how pay is distributed, et cetera? The other one is, what does the CPD practice? And one of the things that I noticed also in the response, the CPD's response to the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing, and unfortunately that document didn't come before this body for public comment. You discussed it in a pre-council session, but not in public. But the question remains if frontline officers and supervisors actually practice what is in policy and training, and if the policy or training conflicts with the department culture, behaviors will not change. So the question is, what is our philosophy about making our officers and community comfortable? How do we practice it, and what policy are we using? And internal procedural justice is something that's internal and external, as I talked about before. How people are treated on the inside really impacts how they're going to treat people on the outside. So we can't work on the outside unless we work on the inside first. So that is really, really, really important. If we have a punitive internal culture, people inside that culture are going to come out and be punitive to people in the community. And we know that that's not very good. And finally, the historical context, one of the things I noticed in the report is the officers were upset about Mr. Mathis and Chief Burton locking arms with protesters after the murder of Michael Brown, and it would have been a great time to have a conversation about why they were standing there with the officers, so the officers didn't think that they were anti-police or that the community was anti-police. People were upset about someone being murdered, right? And there's been a lot of that. So it's important to understand the historical context of how Black people have been treated in this country and in this community. It's very much connected to the way we profile and saturate our neighborhoods, like occupied territory. This is something that we've done as a historical practice. So history does matter. I'm running out of time, but just one more thing about equity. I just thought it was interesting to look at the history of the Columbia Police Department and note that we didn't hire our first female officer until 1972. Our first Black female officer, 1973, first female officer was white. 1982, first Black female officer. And our first deputy chief promoted in 2014. These are fairly recent. So there's not a lot of equity in that department, in the police department. Something else for us to work on. And just quickly about historical context, if you look at the history of the Boone County Sheriff's website, they admit that the way we used to do justice in Boone County is that we had extrajudicial justice. So the public took justice into their own hands and would hang people. So we just need to remember